G'day friends. Just thought I'd make a quick video just in response to a couple of my subs who were asking a couple of good questions. What is charity? What is property? And how do they relate to each other? And excuse me, this video is about not being able to have property unless you have charity. And that property, okay, the foundation of property is charity. Okay, without charity, you don't really have property. And what is property? Well, property. Let's break it down into the proper. Okay, it's whatever's proper, whatever's good and proper. So if I work, okay, my labour is good, and it's a proper thing to do, and so that's property. My labour is property. Okay, the fruit of my labour. If I work and I labour and I convert my labour to money, and that money is property. If it's just weight and measure, and we can get to that a little bit later on. But let's say I buy a piece of land. Well, that's property, okay, because it's come from the proper source of labour. A house could be property. A tree, an orchard could be property. The fruit off that is property. Your body is property. Okay, God made your body, so your body should be God's property and your property because you look after your body. Your mind is your property or should be your property. But today, no matter how rich you may think you are or how free you may think you are, because you know a few things, you know enough to be dangerous, none of those things are your property, actually. So your labour is not your property. You work, you might make $100, got to pay $30, okay, because someone's got a gun to your head. So that 30% of your labour is not your property. It's the property of the state. So you can't say your labour is your property because someone else owns it also. It's not fully your property. And you've agreed to give that away. You've made a deal. But that's another video, and I've covered that in videos in the past. We might touch on a little bit about why your labour is not your property. But when you buy a house, okay, a lot of people think that that's their property, but it's not. They own the title to the house, but if you look on your property deed, you'll find that you're named as the tenant. You are only a tenant because the state owns your property that you live in. That's why you have to pay property tax. Okay, so little things like that. Your labour, your house, your land isn't your property. Your body isn't your property. Okay. If it was, you'd own all of your labour. Your mind isn't even your property. Okay, it should be, but on a daily basis, you do things that are against your will because you're forced to do them because of the contracts that you have entered into. You have signed away your rights and you are doing things that you don't necessarily agree with, such as funding abortion, funding war with your tax dollars. Oh, but Mark, you don't understand. I've got no choice. Well, you do have a choice. That's the good news. And the reality is that you made a choice, maybe without even realising. You made a choice to receive benefits and welfare and health and education for your children and all the other benefits that you may not even be aware of. You've agreed to sign away your rights, and that includes being forced to pay into a system and into a government that maybe does things with those funds that you don't agree with. So your mind is saying one thing, but you're actually doing another. So you've lost your mind in that sense. There's a piece of your mind that you can't, you can't satisfy because you've made an agreement against that. It's kind of like a schizophrenic thing if you think about it. If I can use that word, it's probably not the best word to use, but um, so you're in a world where you actually don't own a lot of property, and that's what that's what we want. We want property. We want things to be proper. We want to own our mind and our body and our labour and our house and our land. We want to own that land. We want to say that that's mine. And because if it's not yours, well, you don't have control over it. If it's not your own body, you don't have control over your own body or mind. So, you know, um, it's a bit of a sad situation. And the reason that there is no property is that there is no charity, because it's not proper. Okay, it comes from the word property. It's not proper to force another man to contribute to your welfare in a socialist system. And that's what you're in. And that's what you're doing on a daily basis. And even you may not agree with it, like on a spiritual level, but that's what we just spoke about. Even though you don't agree with it, you're still doing it. You're still paying tax because you have made an agreement. And that's your yes must be yes. So there's no property because there's no charity. And forcing your neighbour to contribute to your welfare and the welfare of the needy of society, that's the opposite of charity. Okay? Charity doesn't need you to force to pay, to give. Charity is where you give freely, okay, out of love. And what they've been successful at hiding over the centuries is that there actually is a way, a system of society that operates by charity and not by force. We all grew up thinking, oh, it's the only way. You've got to pay tax because that's the only way that the needy of society can be looked after. No, it isn't. There's another way, and that's what they've been hiding. And in fact, this other way was the predominant form of government and society prior to the Norman invasion of 1066, and the Domesday Book which was basically a tax roll. Okay, it's where the Vatican, through kings, came to the free people and enslaved them back into a system of corvée, statutory tax and slavery. So, yeah, but as I was saying, the predominant form of society, welfare system of society, was based on charity. People just gave what they believed they should give and what they could afford to give and what they wanted to give because the choice was still with them. They owned their mind, they owned their choice, they owned their land, they owned themselves and their labour, and they were free men. And they had charity. That's why. It has to be based on charity. Okay, without charity, what happens is society must enter into a contract with one another, saying, you must pay X, and if you don't, then the rest of society, through the agency of government, must come at you with force to make you pay. Okay, and what happens is people get in power, and then they start telling you how much you should pay, and it usually gets more and more and more, and then it's just the cycle. Okay, the power corrupts, and the absolute power corrupts absolutely, and before long you've got a full blown socialist society that like myself and like many others, you've worked all your life, you work a full week, and you can barely pay the bills, put a roof over your head, eat, you know, like there's not a lot left over, and as time goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse. And we're just about at the end of this cycle, so